Welcome to Reimagining Cyber, a podcast where we dive into the challenges and opportunities shaping the future of cybersecurity. And in this episode, we're going to be exploring the key findings from the IANS 2025 Cybersecurity Staff Compensation Benchmark Report. But this conversation goes far beyond salary figures. We're going to be talking about what really goes on beneath the surface, why over half of cybersecurity leaders just below the CISO level are actually considering changing jobs, what's driving this trend, and what organizations can do about it. With me is Rob Aragao, OpenText's Chief Security Strategist. Hey Rob, how you doing?
Good, Ben. How you doing?
Yeah, all good. Now, tell me a bit about it, what it is, what's the significance?
Sure. So I came across this. It was released a little earlier this year, I believe in February. And IANS is always great for some different types of research around, obviously, information security. And IANS, for those that don't know, is the Institute for Applied Network Security. And to your point, Ben, again, they had this report around staff compensation. And really the elements, not to get into the compensation details and whatnot, if you want to do that, go take a look at the report for sure. But it's more about the interesting aspect of concern as it relates to cybersecurity leadership, and not necessarily at the level of the CISO, but the level beneath the CISO. So all kind of those direct reports that are responsible for all sorts of different areas around cybersecurity, such as identity access management, application security, data security, cloud security, and so on and so forth. And really what it was calling out at a top level is that over 50% of the respondents in this survey basically are contemplating changing, right? Their employment, whether that's relative to the role that they're in or relative to the organization. But as we all know from the current economic climate, they're kind of in this wait and see situation where they have to obviously take a look at, is it truly a good time for them to make a move at this point in time? One. Two, many organizations obviously aren't quite hiring at the frequency that we've seen, over the past few years. So the market dynamics and the timing around this is kind of causing a bit of a pause, but it's also an opportunity for the organizations that these individuals are a part of to realize that this concern is out there and weighing on people, and that they should be considering, honestly, some sort of kind of, cost retention opportunities that they could take upon themselves to ensure that these people, who are pretty critical, obviously, to the cybersecurity operational elements of their business, stay with them, right? So that's kind of the top level theme of the report, Ben.
We'll go on to the opportunities in just a moment, but does it kind of delve in any depth into the things that are causing such dissatisfaction? Is it, as simple as pay and things like that? Is there more to it?
It's a multitude for sure of different things. So one of the things, if you think back, we've had some different conversations as it relates to, cybersecurity, personnel, and burnout. So is that an element of this? Yeah, to a certain extent it is. But surprisingly, it wasn't really the key driving factor behind it. So more of it ends up being, actually, as they call out within the report, leadership bottleneck. So, as the CISOs are staying actually longer in their current roles, and it's interesting because in the past you would see typically CISOs kind of turning over in an average of about 2 years, 2.5 years. That's not happening any longer. They're much more staying within the particular organization they're part of, which is good. Because unfortunately, in the past, you also saw that they weren't necessarily moving because they wanted to move. They were moving because some sort of incident occurred. And unfortunately, they were kind of put in a bad situation and forced to move out. So that somewhat of a bottleneck for these other, leadership roles is causing a bit of, hesitation on what opportunities present themselves in that organization. And therefore, people are starting to consider what else is out there if they actually left. The other thing that's interesting is, just kind of the structure around the roles themselves. So there's a lot of kind of role creep, if you will, right? There's teams and team members being assigned to specific responsibilities, and then all these different kind of elements start kind of getting, baked into, hey, can you take this on? So adding more to your plate, which honestly, right, we all have to do that. It's pretty typical, but just some of that kind of crossing over and sometimes kind of misalignment with the focus around, the core area. For example, if I'm responsible for application security, now all of a sudden I'm asked to take on some data security, areas of coverage. there may be a bit of friction there. Some people may look at it that way. Honestly, I would look at it as greater opportunity for myself, right, to be able to expand into these different areas. Beyond that, if you look at it from a kind of top level business sense, right, there's organizations that are going through kind of a pause from a spend perspective. So budgeting freezes we're seeing out there. You also have, of course, all sorts of different M&A events that continuously occur. So that can cause a bit of postulation as to, am I going to be part of the new larger organization, or is the acquiring entity going to roll out my function, my role, because there's obviously a correlating individual that's responsible for the same elements of what we do within their business. So is my time, pretty much going to be, we've come together and 6 months later, I'm moving on to having to look at, another opportunity elsewhere. So that's another element. The other thing is looking at offshoring, right? So again, shifting some of that from a cost perspective out and causing a bit of concern on that end. So those are some of the top areas. One other area to take into consideration is kind of the, not offshoring, but more of the pushing out to services-oriented models. We obviously are continuing to see, especially on the security operational side of an organization, that push to a service provider to provide the services of a security operational capability. We hear MDR, managed detection and response providers, being, again, a very big growing area within the cyber market. So that causes a little bit of change, obviously, for people who are focused within running the security operational elements in an organization. But those, Ben, really are kind of the key areas that I would call out from what I read in the report as some of the root causes, if you will.
Just want to go back to you saying, CISOs are not really moving anywhere. So you've got this strange situation developing of CISOs not going anywhere, but there being quite a high turnover of people under that level. It really is rather odd.
Yes, I think it is a bit of a paradigm shift, to your point. Again, we've seen a lot of turnover in the past on CISO roles, and again, 2.5 years average. So I do believe that is a very strong positive, that we're seeing them in their roles longer. But yeah, it's an interesting balance, because then you have the people that are thinking and hoping that they had this path to potentially becoming the CISO or deputy CISO role, and it's no longer there for them. So they're looking at other opportunities. Now, I'll say this. I've seen many different people who are very, very great examples of leaders in cybersecurity really appreciate what they've been able to do in coaching individuals to then become a CISO, whether it's at the organization that they are at and that CISO has moved on, or somewhere else. And one of the people who we've had on many times in the past that is a major proponent of coaching and great, example of building on and bringing people into CISO roles was Jim Routh. Jim Routh has done it time and time again through many of the different organizations he's been at, with promoting from within, but then also, again, as he's been able to have those individuals go on to other organizations. Another one that we've seen out there is also recently, actually, the CISO of Equifax, who transitioned into the role of CTO, I want to say a year or a year and a half or so ago, and some of the kind of team members that have been within that organization and the roles that they've been able to move from into other organizations and lead as the CISO. A great way of, again, building up that, credibility, validation, and taking that elsewhere. Just people, again, as strong leaders that have been able to obviously continue to coach and really level up those other folks for greater opportunities, in some cases elsewhere.
Budgets are always tight. Do you think there are any non-monetary benefits that could influence cybersecurity professionals' decisions to stay or leave?
Yeah, I guess so, right? It could be part of retention, could be relative to, a proper professional development program, if you will. So, like I said a little while ago as an example, where some people may not like taking on another area of cyber, I think that's a major benefit. It allows them to better round themselves out. It allows them, if they want to become a CISO, to have that experience of other areas. Again, I use the simple example of, if I ran the application security part of the program, I'm picking up some of the data security portions of it. That's a positive from my perspective. So I think, if people are open-minded to realizing the value in development of their capabilities beyond just kind of the silo that they're maybe used to, that's a great way and a great kind of lever to pull as part of retention. We also know that retention I know you said non-monetary, but from a monetary perspective, obviously plays a role as well. But also, even working within different teams, right? Being able to do more collaboration, being able to better understand really what the mission overall is for the business they're a part of holistically. So their piece in one of the particular areas, of course, is critically important, but understanding the greater, mission across what they're trying to do to protect the organization while also driving, opportunities for, reducing costs around regulatory potential penalties and so on holistically, I think is critical. So I do believe that there are levers that can be pulled to help with the retention, whether monetary or not. And those are some examples that I would actually call upon to leverage.
Just want to use your experience now for a moment, Rob. When you read this report, was it something that took you by surprise? Did you see it as accurate?
I do see it as accurate. So it didn't take me by surprise. I guess for me, it's more so about, in cyber, the difference in this report, I would say, is that historically, we have seen the desire to move on be centered and grounded on burnout. And this report, I believe, maybe once referenced burnout. So my point is what was interesting to me is the pivot finally beyond the burnout, element coming into play, which is good. The other aspect was the longevity that we're seeing more so now on the CISO role. And Ben, I think for me, that's playing into what we discuss wholeheartedly in many of the conversations and guests that we have join us on Reimagining Cyber, that need of the CISO role truly understanding what they're trying to align as far as the business outcomes with the organization they're with, versus historically where the CISO role has been one that has been very much technically focused. And so my point in bringing that up is it's the evolution of the role of the CISO that I believe has now played into, the aspect of, again, longevity. So I think, those were two kind of key elements, is the factor that burnout really doesn't seem to be playing as much of a role in, kind of the negative aspect of, hey, this is why I want to leave and move on, as well as, of course, the CISO longevity really taking shape. But again, I think that connection point to me really is the alignment to the business and the business outcomes and the risk posture and measuring those things versus the speeds and feeds and feature capability of what they're trying to do and control mechanisms, which, again, as we've talked about many times, you could never, ever have that type of conversation with the board, because if you did, probably the last board meeting you're going to be part of.
Fantastic. Finally, then, a quick message to CISOs: pack up your bags, get lost because there's someone underneath you that wants a job. That's wrong. I presume that's not it.
That's not it. I think what it is my message would be that keep doing your thing. Be very, very open to expanded opportunities. So like I was mentioning the examples, take on the additional role. Be able to better round yourself out. The opportunity, if your desire to be a CISO, will present itself, whether within the organization you're in today or somewhere else. Ensure that you're aligned with the proper leader, the coach, the mentor that will support you, whether, again, staying at that organization and taking on their role in the future if they decide to do something differently, or the path to the same role as a CISO somewhere else. So I think that's really what I would say, is just stay focused and be very open-minded to being able to take on additional responsibility, because it just helps round yourself out.
Rob, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
And that is it for this episode of Reimagining Cyber. There's a lot to think about there, from the shifting dynamics under the CISO level to how leaders can do more to support and retain their top cyber talent. And if you're in cybersecurity leadership, then the message, I think, is clear. Investing in your team's growth, giving them room to stretch, that really could be the difference between keeping great people or just losing them. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you found this episode helpful, interesting, or just relatable, I'd love it if you could share it with a colleague or someone else in the industry. Leave us a quick review or hit that follow button so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got more great guests and conversations lined up, so do stay tuned. and we'll see you next time on Reimagining Cyber.